This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Happy holidays. This is our December episode for the Digital Dish.
Happy holidays.
Yes. Jingle, 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 jingle. Today we have, it's a little different format today. So it's myself, Jeanne Cuff, Lois Coatney, Julie Fernandez, and we have a new co-host, Missy Lawrence-Johnston. Missy, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. As Jeanne said, I'm Missy Lawrence-Johnston. I know it's a long hyphenated name. I am very excited because of my actual soapbox that most people can't get me off of is around people in the human side of digital. So I figure we will have lots to discuss. My current responsibilities are focused on operating model and org design and org effectiveness. So I'm just really excited to bring that specific flavor.
Great. Thank you, Missy. That's great. So because we're heading in the holidays and we're looking back over this past year, our subject for today is the Great Resignation. And you'll find out at the end, we have a little surprise, a bon mot for why we're doing this. But it is really something that I'm hearing a lot about. There's a lot of information. Who's driving it? Why is it? And so I wanted to, Julie's got a whole bunch of facts and figures that we want to talk about. So
don't you know? I mean, everybody's talking about talent. Everybody's talking about whatever you're calling it, the Great Resignation, the Great Wait, people waiting to get back into the office. So I thought I'd start. I've listened to a few podcasts from different sources in the industry recently and wanted to start just with kind of some facts and figures about how many folks is this really impacting. And I'll share the ones that I've heard, see if you guys have heard anything different or have any complementary figures. But I've heard most commonly that 2/3 of the workforce, so 65% of workers, are contemplating their career.
Wow. Oh, wait, I didn't hear that.
That means like almost half of us.
2 out of 3.
I heard 95% of existing employees.
Okay. So out of the 4 of us, 2.5 of us are thinking about this, basically.
Yeah.
Wow.
There you go. And, for all sorts of reasons, I'm sure we'll dig into that. And then I've heard a couple of different stats around the percentage of folks that are actually changing jobs. One survey said about 28% of folks, which is quite a few. The other said 40. So, let's say, 1 in 3 is kind of the average of, now will the year bear that out? I don't know. I'm sure many people will be reporting things, but somewhere between 28 and 40% of the workforce is changing jobs and careers, in fact. What have you guys been hearing?
Well, I just looked at a few things that was crazy, and I saw it by state. And it's typically, it seems like there was one statistic here that said just in a particular month, 4 to 5 million people quit their jobs, which is about 3% of the workforce. And, so I think it's taking those and actually looking at it month to month.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking that's crazy. We started to see it kind of in the spring, right? Especially for all of, when you go to restaurants and you didn't see a lot of, they had to restrict because they just didn't have enough staff to help. But first I was thinking, where is it just in that particular sector? But it's happening across every, I don't know whether it's different industries, it's different types of work, it's in services, it's in manufacturing. I mean, it seems to be pretty pervasive across everything. I don't know.
Yeah, heaviest hit I've seen have been I'll call them low-end jobs, right? Where we're seeing the service industry just really struggle. And then the other thing that I've heard in a September 2020 survey is female exits are 4 times that of male exits, which is phenomenal. And of course, we know some of that has to do with the balance of work life, and all the struggles that we talk about in this podcast regularly.
Yeah.
But 4x seems like a strikingly big number. And I thought that was interesting from a male-female. I heard one other here stat on male and female. And even though we're exiting 4 times as fast, some of those same surveys said that the male employment, so males over 20 years old that are employed, the percentage of males over 20 employed is under 70% for the first time recorded ever.
I've heard that recently.
So while we're changing jobs more often, we're carrying a far bigger load of the employed workforce compared to men, who have been more than 70% employed over the years. It's just stunning statistics.
So I heard, Julie, that 95% of existing employees, it might have been Business Insider a couple weeks ago, are considering leaving their existing job.
95, wow.
Now, whether they're resigning from the workforce altogether or looking for something different.
So here's the thing that I was reading this wrong for the past few months. I'm reading this thing from the Harvard Business Review. I just found it from September. It says 4 million Americans quit their jobs in July 2021. I was reading that cumulative, but that's just 1 month.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's Lois's monthly stat right there.
Well, I know. That's what and then I'm going, wait, I'm reading this wrong. I thought, 4.3 million. That's a month. That blows my mind. But this Harvard Business Review does say that, let's see, the resignation rates are highest among mid-career employees.
Okay.
This is their search. So it's in the 30 to 45-year-old employees in the mid-range that they're quitting. And also the highest resignations in tech and healthcare industries. That's what this Harvard Business Review was. I know that and then they give a whole, quantify the problem.
Yeah.
And here's a math problem for you to figure out and why.
Yeah.
But are they leaving the workforce or are they just changing jobs? Because what I seem to be reading is we're at the highest rate we've ever seen of people leaving, but we're
Yes.
also at the highest rate of jobs that are available.
Yes.
So I don't know if anybody's seen any of that stats. It seems anecdotal, or at least what I was able to read, but it feels like it's just a bunch of movement that appears to be happening. And I don't know if that's what some of you guys have seen as well.
I have a theory.
What's your theory, Missy? I love a good theory.
Yes. So, brain science nerd, just a geek. And my theory is that when the pandemic hit, everyone started to think about how precious life was. And life is too short. And I'm not going to spend another day doing something that maybe makes me the money that I want or the validation that I might have gotten from it from before. Life is just too short. And I'm going to do that thing that I never thought that I could do, or I was going to wait, 20 years to do, my bucket list. I'm doing it now. People are doing it now and figuring it out. And so the value system has changed. People's personas have changed, that identity crisis, all of that fear that drives us to kind of stay where we are at work. It was more fearful to not have maybe lived the life that you've lived. And so when I think about the statistics of that age range, like midlife, and the women, right, moving, I am now driven by something else. I'm motivated by something else. And that's what really draws people to work is purpose. And so if I can't connect that purpose, maybe the oxytocin that I used to get from work or from meeting with, my colleagues, I don't have that anymore. And so when I see things that are just saying burnout, I get it. We're back to back in meetings and things like that. But I freaking love my job. And you get tired and you rest and you come back. But to completely leave that's got to be something different with purpose and values to me.
I think also the fact that remote working, which, probably many of us on this call, we've done some element of remote working already. But when you have a big amount of people who I think when you go to an office every day, you're kind of in that grind and you don't almost have time to sit back and think.
Yep.
And then because then now there is this time to sit at home, and granted, we were all very busy at home. I don't know if we had necessarily more time to think, but it certainly brought in this element of flexibility. So to your point, Missy, it's like the purpose of what am I doing? And wait a minute, if I'm home and I'm not in this commute, I have more time to have dinner with my family. I have more time to do these things.
Absolutely.
And I think it almost caused us to rethink about what we spend our time on every day, and just, I'm not going back. Now I'm going to look for something that's much more flexible, because I do want everything. I want to work, but I also want to do all these other things that I want to spend my time on.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, Lois, some of the same sources that I was looking into recently said that there's absolutely some truth to that. And there's certainly some population of work from home folks, who just have had a taste of it and are not going back, right? They're just not interested in it. ADP actually did some studies of folks. I think they had about 9,000 people surveyed, and people that were working from home equated that independence with a feeling of innovation. So they felt that it gave them, whether it was just the ability to, because you're not commuting and doing some of those other, hassles, but yet 55% of folks in the survey felt that it was important to show up. And they actually found that hybrid, work some from home and some in the workforce was, kind of the best of both worlds and preferred. And it was particularly the most preferred ideal model for parents with young kids, because they valued the time and flexibility to work from home, but also valued, I need to get away from this in order to truly be productive. And so some sort of a mix. I've seen that from multiple sources. I also see in that whole discussion a lot of conversations about how that applies more to knowledge workers or managers than, folks whose job really isn't that conducive to working from home no matter what, right? And that might account for some of the career changing that we see, or people just saying, well, phooey, I'm going to do something completely different because I want one work situation or another.
I read this article today in the New York Times on Gen Z and how they're challenging these structures of corporations. And then there was another article about gig work. So I don't think these things are driving the resignation, but I think they are going to impact our future. Missy, you're nodding your head like crazy. So tell me what you think. I just read this article and I'm like, wow, that's pretty intense.
Well, you think about the community of, I think of asynchronous productivity, where look at the Facebooks and the Instagrams and people who are born digital, they have such strong sense of connection and engagement and community with people they may never meet. And they follow each other and they're related. They know each other's lives. That sense of community that some generations might not feel naturally if you can't walk into a campus, that generation, it's like, what do you even talk? What's the difference, right? And so I can't remember where it was, but there is a list of, I have to find it, the largest communities of people. And the top 5, like one's China. They're not geographic regions. It's the Facebook community. It's like, these are the communities. So I think it's the idea of employee choice, I think, that Julie's really hitting on. That is around, and there is a book by an author, a neuroscientist, Dr. David Rock, called Your Brain at Work, that has a model that I leverage all the time called SCARF. It's an acronym. So, no spoiler alerts for things in the future, but one of the main things is autonomy. And that autonomy that you have, you don't get to that innovation and just that feeling, even if nothing's actually different. So I think if employees start to have more choice and autonomy, more important than, do I want to go into the office, or do I want to be hybrid, or do I want to be remote, right? It's just that level of autonomy that some people call privilege or entitlement in other generations. Yeah. And they require it. So, yeah.
It makes me wonder if the way the pandemic, has changed the way we work, and we all could work at home. If it was 50 years ago, we wouldn't have all been able to work at home like we do now. So you wonder if it's the bringing together of the pandemic and everybody doing that. But again, about the autonomy, the digital innovations that we've had to enable us to work more autonomous and with flexibility and, kind of have the art of possible of working anywhere with anyone at any time. It's almost like all those pieces came together to drive something that I don't think we ever could have foreseen. Actually, maybe those digital, visionaries probably saw us getting here at some point in time, but the way that the pandemic, made it really happen aggressively, we did that. But the fact that this great resignation is maybe just the one piece that caught us off guard, because the traditional four walls of an office building now has exploded, and now everybody's taking a much more forward, kind of I'm in control of what I can do. Look at all the options available. So yeah, I'm going to make a different decision. And I didn't see that one coming.
No. But to that end, let's bring up why this became such an issue for us. Our friend Julie, our co-host, is resigning and moving on. So Julie, tell us your reasons. Give us some ideas of what your reasons are. We're going to miss you, but help us understand what your reasons are. Because honestly, I think the resignation is different for everyone.
It really is. Thanks, Jeanne. I put myself in the category of the least likely person to leave because, like Missy said, I love what I do. I love the people that I work with. I love the interaction. For me, of course, it had nothing to do with work at home. We're very virtual knowledge workers, and I've been doing that for more than 20 years. So that was not my issue. That is some people's issues. My issue really focuses around the work-life balance, to be honest. And my husband is compromised and earlier retired than me. And so, it makes me think that, whatever that interim time is, we're aggressive and there's so much opportunity for growth and so many things to get into at ISG that is my own triple alpha personality drives me to do more work than I should life and family.
What's that about? I don't even understand that.
It's a heart-wrenching thing, but you also recognize that, if I just keep going along loving what I do and loving it so much that I'm throwing an inordinate amount of time into my professional life, I actually run the risk of missing a window of opportunity when I have a husband to do things with, or when kids are at critical points in their, careers. Mine are at early 20s, I think everybody has heard. And, so there is more to do now, and there's a finite window there.
Yeah.
And so I surprised myself, I have to say, because I'm not a disgruntled person leaving unhappy. I've thrived and loved the environment, and I love all the opportunities. And, there's a bit of self-control and imposing self-control that I'm going to just try something new. And, I do think there is something, Lois mentioned it earlier, people get, halfway into a chaotic situation, which was thrust upon everyone with COVID. And you're like, well, I'm halfway into doing things very differently, than I've done with my work and my home life. And so if you're resilient and you've found, your resilience muscle, you feel a little bit like, well, I'm already in, flux right now. So, how much more could it be?
You're just heading off the cliff is what you're saying, right, Julie? Just going right over the cliff.
It's the only extreme sport I'll ever practice.
She could be jumping into nirvana, not heading off a cliff. Come on now, Jeanne.
All right. I'm just saying. That sounds like a cliff.
I envision, we'll say, I don't know, 6 months, a year into this, we'll invite Julie back, of course, and get an update. And we're all going to be going, oh, man, like, why didn't we do that?
Or maybe we won't. Maybe our employers will say, please don't, because Julie was not disgruntled. Like, that was the light bulb that just went off for me. You're not disgruntled. Like, that's the risk. You've got great people, great engagement and knowledge that kind of walks out,
Yeah.
what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What's our succession plan for Julie?
I picked up a book that I read on my recent trip to Mexico where we did get in a short vacation, and it's the worst read it's just a very difficult read, but the book itself was so interesting to me. It's called Anti-Fragile, and I meant to have it in front of me so I could tell you the author, but I don't, so I can't. And what the premise of the book is, we know that there's a part of our society that is fragile, and we hear a lot of talk about being resilient.
Yeah, grit.
Which is the ability to, weather, all kinds of shocks to the system, right? But what you don't count on is anti-fragile. And if you're anti-fragile, then you actually thrive when things are thrown up in chaos. And so, it very much fits, some of the mental health, workforce mental health and behavioral stuff that you see where people are slugging along, and, some of them aren't even resilient, but then being resilient, you're still waiting for a back to normal, right? An anti-fragile character is a character that, that thrives on, that actually grows and enriches themselves when things are, not stable and they're bouncing around a little bit chaotic. And maybe I just read that book at the wrong time. It was really, I'm telling you, it's not an easy read. So, don't count on it as an enjoyable, quick read. But the concepts in it were just, I couldn't put it down because I thought I want to be anti-fragile.
I think that's really interesting, Julie, when you're talking about that, because you think about all the women who have, and because I think this whole resignation thing has really affected women who are saying, we can't keep doing this. We have to change. And I think companies, and I know companies are going to really feel that loss. So maybe that is what women are saying. We need to redo things so it meets what we need to do with the kids. I feel like I'm so glad my kids aren't in their 20s and out of the house, because it's just, I think the women with kids at home has been tremendously challenging. And so maybe they're just figuring out, look, we can't do this until you give us some ability to incorporate these balances in our lives.
Yeah. Here's a super interesting, narrative that I heard about women and, about workers and COVID and how they were impacted. 2/3, this is again through an ADP webinar, 2/3 of workers had their job cut or their pay cut, their job cut in some way or lost. 2/3 of society. And out of those, during that period of time, folks that continued to work gave 2 times more free overtime effort and hours, right? This applies to folks that are salaried workers and are hourly workers, right? So if the average was 4 hours during the pandemic, the increase went up to 9 hours a week of extra work that people who felt grateful enough to be working through the pandemic were doing. And it also said that Gen X's were impacted the most. And now that we're coming through to, this has been prolonged, people are still working those, that extra time. And that to me is what we're hearing reflected in these conversations around mental health, because it's not mental health like, do I have a diagnosed mental disease, right? It's mental health. Like I'm overworked and I'm just spending too much of imbalance, on work versus something else. The same narrative said men during this period of COVID reported experiencing more flexibility from their employers and their managers than women did. It said women picked up more responsibilities and that they were less likely to be paid than men for the extra work that they did. And, so overall, kind of the conclusions out of some of that narrative were there are chemistry and culture issues that employers have with unpaid overtime, right? And we say that, but many of us are knowledge workers and salary paid workers, but it impacts us the same. We know that it's time above and beyond that we're giving to our employers. And I think there's something to be said for that. And every time I hear, mental health, and I think, why are we categorizing it that way? But I think that's the phenomena that they're trying to describe as being an unhealthy behavior for the organization to continue in perpetuity, right?
Well, it's definitely something that I think, and maybe we have another chat on this, because you're right. if we're going to, one, individually, we all, I think, use this as an example of we still need to look after ourselves. No one else is going to look after ourselves more than we look after ourselves. So we need to do the right thing for us. So I applaud you, Julie, for taking this step and saying, you know what, this is the right thing for me. And I think that's fantastic. But secondarily, as companies, I mean, there needs to be, and we as women, I think, have a big role to play to say, wait a minute, we feel it, we all feel it, and what can we do within our work environments to start to drive some of that change? Because, we have to. And if we, if we're going to try to figure out what that balance is, I bet there's not one person here talking us between the four of us that we probably haven't all thought, oh my gosh, I've had it.
Are we talking this past week or this past month? No, I'm teasing.
Yeah, well, or multiple times. But, what can we do differently and what can we influence? And, I think we have, now's the time, because of the Great Resignation, maybe we have more power and influence to say, wait, this needs to change. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see this. So let's figure out how we can make this a better environment for all of us to work in. So I look at it as an opportunity for us.
Well, I think on that note, because that's a cheery note, Lois.
Love it.
It's actually putting a lot of responsibility on us, but I'm okay with it. But I just want to say then, on that note, let's wish our listeners Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And we'll be sorry to lose Julie, but I'm delighted that Missy is going to be with us moving forward. So I feel like we're in a good place. And Julie, we plan to invite you back in like 6 months. I'm going to have Missy interview you.
Oh.
Yeah, there we go.
Lois and I have a whole history with you. We say Missy interviews Julie about, okay, talk to me about, the change and how this affects you as a person.
This is so dangerous. I see the devilish look in her eyes already.
Oh, yeah.
Already starting a book.
Yeah.
Well, we wish you the best, Julie, and looking forward to talking to you again, but all the best to you.
Thanks, everyone, and keep listening. This podcast has been one of the highlights of my career, and I'm excited to stay subscribed and can't wait to hear what you guys talk about next.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.